We do record this part of the meeting every month, and we store it up on the North Star Advocates website so that if people do miss the meetings, they're able to look at the training topic or whatever kind of work group we have during this section. So for today, we are actually asking for all of you to take the survey that Jim talked about, but also then for us to have a discussion and dialogue on anything you think we're missing, items that need to be added, anything on the content that you think we need to change. The group has developed this survey, so I want to thank MJ and V, as well as Jim and others. But the goal really is to gather feedback. Like Jim said, it started with just looking at young adults and looking at the YABs, but now we've expanded it to professionals, individuals with lived experience, family members, system partners. So really having a more comprehensive view. The plan for this survey is after we all take it, so I'm just going to warn you, like we're going to go silent for 15 minutes while you're taking the survey on Zoom. So that's going to, and then we'll have a discussion. But after that, I'll take the feedback and we will make any of the updates that the group decides needs to be made. And then after that, we're setting up meetings with various YABs across the state so that we can do the same survey, get young adult feedback. And then like Jim said, Arthur, your group, any other groups that we need to have meetings with so we can conduct this feedback. We also will be putting this survey, what Jim and I discussed, on our website so that different stakeholders and individuals can go right on to the website and take that. So I'm pretty excited about this and then the way we can collect the data. So I'll walk you through all of that. But are there any questions before I launch this thing? Jim, I see you.
I'm just going to say real quick, I just want to be clear too with expectations. These, whatever you give input in, it is advisory. We can't guarantee we'll make that decision because healthcare authority is the final arbitrator. But if we get a theme that is cross-sectional about, yeah, you should do X, Y, Z, our partners at Healthcare Authority want what's good for young people. So I can't imagine they're not going to take that into account. But I just really want to make sure that there's no expectation of, well, I said this and then the RFP didn't have my language in there. Yeah, you get the point.
No, thank you, Jim. And I also want to say this is anonymous. However, just warning you, I will share my screen. We will not be able to see who wrote what, but whatever you write in there, we as a group are going to go over. So I also just want to put that as a framework so nobody's surprised when you see your answer written up on my screen in the next 15 minutes. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to launch this poll and we're going to trust that all of our technology is going to work. So I'm going to ask real quick to see, do you all have something that has popped up on your screen? Okay, good. Now, it looks like for some that it's just one question. It's not. It's 12 questions. So if you've never done a Zoom poll before, I just want you to know some of them have a part A and a part B, so you really have to read it. And then there's a rating scale. It's pretty user-friendly once you kind of look at that. Some of yours might have started at the end, so make sure you scroll up and start on question 1. I'm going to go silent. There is a timer up there. It's not to intimidate anybody, but if you want to go ahead and just raise your hand when you're done via the Zoom chat, that way I don't make us stay a full 15 minutes if people do finish a little bit earlier. I just got a question, and if somebody did lose the poll, if you go down to the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen, that's where you'll find polls and quizzes, and it should pop back up. I don't want to interrupt everyone, but I'm starting to see some come in, and I just want to make sure you know, if you're done, make sure you press submit when you're done taking this poll. And again, hands up when you are finished. Thank you. All right, we've got a couple more minutes. Again, we'll wait till everybody's done. 7 out of 11 of us have finalized and submitted. That's a 63%. Oh, 7 out of 10. So just again, make sure you press submit once you're done and raise your hand so that I know everybody has completed it. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes. All right, at this point, I believe we're just waiting on maybe 1 or 2 individuals. It's like someone just came in. So again, I'm going to give everyone about 1 more minute and then we'll wrap it up. And we'll go over some of the data. All right, and not to put anybody on the spot, but Jackie, I think we're waiting for you, and I don't want to end the poll if you're close to finishing it. But
Sorry, I actually, for some reason, my Zoom updated, so I don't know how to raise my hand. I have submitted my.
Oh, perfect. Then that's great. So it looks like 10 of us, there's 10 people. Some of us couldn't fill it out. Jim and I can't. So this is great. Thank you, Jackie. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll.
Sarah, while you're doing that, can I just say how exciting this is? And I know that sounds like brochure talk, but for those of us who, all of you, worked on 1929 in some form or fashion, to actually be at this stage, to actually realizing housing for young people coming out of inpatient, I just want to say this is one of those milestones that I hope we can just take a moment to to honor and acknowledge and again express our appreciation for your partnership to make this happen. It is really, really awesome. And thank you, Sarah, for the survey and all that. But this is cool stuff for me.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I agree. And I want to thank you all for taking the time. I know it's, a little bit awkward to sit on a Zoom call for 15 minutes. So thank you for actually filling this thing out. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and then we are going to look at some of the, can you all see my screen? Good. Okay, so we're going to go over some of the details, but I want you to be able to see what I'm seeing. And then let's have a discussion, an informal conversation. We can look at some of the trends, but then please, anybody who has something to say, call it out. But you can see in this poll, 9 out of 10 of us completed it.
So Sarah, I'm going to interrupt. What I can see now is it just says Zoom. It doesn't, it's
Oh,
not
you
showing.
can't see. Okay, here we go. Hold on
So
one
we
second.
can, there we
You
go.
see this now?
Yes.
Okay,
And if you can't make it bigger print for old eyes, that would be cool. But if not, you can read it to us, whatever you want.
do it. No, I would rather not, but if I have to, I will read it to you. I'm gonna minimize this bar on the side where I can see all of your faces. So if anybody has a question, V or Jim or MJ, can you help me out? So we're gonna go ahead and minimize this, and you all can.
Yes, I also want to say that, and I don't think people care, but we did say it was anonymous, and I can see people's names by their answer.
Yeah, I can see that too. So in the other one, what I'm realizing is it was anonymous when you're signed in as a guest. So you can see your things. Do we want to share it like this? Because I also don't have to. We can just quickly look. And I'm happy to not share it if people don't want their information.
Yeah, well, let's just ask. Anyone object to their name being connected to their answer? This is the first time we've done this survey with anyone, so we'll learn as we go. But anyone object to your name being connected to an answer?
I'm looking.
Come off mute and say so, please, because we want to respect it if you feel that way, but I really can't imagine. We're just trying to be respectful.
Well, and this is again, this is why we wanted to do this with this group, so we can look at all of this, see how this works in this setting, because I have 3 different versions of how we can do this. So if people are okay with that, we'll go ahead. And again, please feel free to actually jump in and talk about this. But we'll proceed then.
Great.
Okay, so we're gonna look at the personal experiences barriers. I don't know if we want me to read all of them because that feels, but we can kind of just look over this for a moment. And then I really want to have a discussion about things that stood out or areas that we need to kind of make some improvements.
Can I make a suggestion that you read the
Yeah.
question just to get us grounded, and then folks can speak up? We have their written thing, but yeah,
Perfect.
let's make this part of a conversation, and we also have the data to go forward. But
Okay, great.
to
And we'll
see
do it
where the
one
conversation.
question at a time. So that's a great idea.
Wonderful.
Okay, so number 1, personal experience, barriers to treatment, understanding the specific challenges faced by individuals when seeking and completing treatment helps us identify and address gaps in the current behavioral health system. This is a 2-part question. Part A is, what were the biggest challenges you or someone you know faced when seeking treatment for a behavioral health condition? And the second part is, what challenges did you or someone you know experience after completing treatment? So what do we have to say? Does anybody want to discuss this, or do you want me to kind of look through everybody's answers?
Well, let's engage, folks. So if you're willing to, even if you repeat what you said, that's okay. It'll spark conversation. Hmm,
And Jim, I'm going to let you pick on people and engage, because again, I'm going to minimize the boxes where I can see everyone so I can kind of continue to take us
Great.
through the survey.
Yeah. Anyone willing to start us off? And again, don't be shy about repeating what you said, because we can read this later. But the important part is what iterative conversation can we have around these questions?
I'm willing to share mine. And then I don't know if it was seen, but I just want to highlight something that was in the chat. It looks like someone didn't want their answers shared.
Yeah,
So
MJ,
just so that we have that.
Okay, so we're gonna
thank
go
you.
down. Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, I can share mine though.
Please.
I didn't really know. I mean, I know there's not really right or wrong answers with this because it's personal experience, but I didn't really know like if this is super relevant to what you were asking. But I have like personal lived experience with like an inpatient behavioral health care facility. And I would say, I mean, there were kind of a lot, but I would say the main one that first came to my mind was just like incompetence um in some of the just like the approaches. And not to say that you know, all the workers were horrible or that, you know, it was intentional or anything like that, but I just think that there was a lot of areas that were actually like very re-traumatizing to me where it should have been a safe place. And so I would say for the first portion of that answer, for during my care there, I would say the biggest barrier was that like it honestly wasn't helpful like where it was supposed to be helpful. So you know, like that it kind of defeated its own purpose. There was just a lot of areas that weren't trauma informed where they, I feel, definitely should have been. And so I would say for that portion of the answer, yeah, just that it was kind of defeated its own purpose. And then for after, I know this is kind of what the bridge is already like talking about, but I would definitely say my discharge, like just kind of everything in general. I know that's a broad answer, but like I literally just was returning to homelessness, to housing instability, to like abuse, and just all of the things that kind of made me feel like I needed it in the first place. So I don't really know how you would word that as a barrier, but I think it just trauma informed keeps coming back to me. Just like, yeah, just needing that education, that training, I think is super important, especially for behavioral health, substance use, all of that sort of like area, like those facilities. I feel like that's super important because like those are really serious issues and it like super impacts an individual and their life. And so, you know, if you're in that field working with those people, especially youth and young adults who are like still figuring themselves out, who are still figuring their lives out, then you definitely should be taking it seriously and you should have that like up to date training and experience and knowledge and like really just being seeing each person there as an individual and not just another number.
Well, Mayana, as always, you come with such powerful insight, and thank you for sharing that. Uh, Trauma-informed care and discharge planning are, yeah, two incredible things. Thank you for that. Anyone else want to say anything about question number one?
Yeah, I'd like to add something. Like, I feel you, Rihanna, like on my own experiences. Like, when you say incompetence, there's already so much distrust in the behavioral and mental health system, just because I think a lot of people don't understand like diagnosis and like how trauma affects a person beyond the textbook. Um, so it often leads to either misdiagnosing or providing therapy or medication that really makes the symptoms worse for an individual. So just like that distrust is already one barrier, you know, like you want help, but you're too scared to reach out for help. And then once you do get help, is it going to be good or not? If you have like one bad experience, you're going to hesitate to come back and seek for different or more experiences. And I think a lot of the times too, people have a very reactory or like a big reaction when someone like is expressing a difficult situation, and like a provider might see that as like harm, like extreme harm. So then that could lead to like an evaluation, being hospitalized, being detained, when it's just like that's not what I need. You know, I need a support system, and that's just very extreme. And then, you know, that individual um experiences even more trauma in that type of isolated facility. So yeah.
Thank you, V. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Is there
Anyone
any,
else?
yeah, and is there
Okay.
anything else that you think we're missing in that first question that we need to add? I'm going to come up here so we don't actually see people's answers. And again, I apologize about that first learning curve, but I'm hearing a lot about the word trauma and like re-traumatizing. So I don't know if we want to add that in as part of the question as we're asking it, or if we're okay with how it is, where it's at right now. So just if anybody has any comments on that before we go to the next one.
I personally think I kind of like it the way it is because I mean, you know, for people who might not have that direct lived experience, they would feel like if it had like that trauma piece in there, they might not feel like it might be intimidating. They might be like, oh, well, I don't know how to answer this because it has that piece in it. But I really like this because for me, like as someone with lived experience, it invites me to be able to share that if I want, but then it also like it allows me to go into other avenues. So like I see an answer with like insurance and stuff like that. Like, you know, it really opens up the floor and is like a lot more broad and really lets people like share what they feel comfortable sharing. And so I personally kind of like how it's worded. Because like for me, like a barrier was definitely trauma for me, but like that might not be, you know, for everyone, but I don't know.
No, great, thank you. All right, I'm gonna move us on to number 2.
Sorry, Sarah, can I add one thing? Is there a limit on the characters
No,
of,
we can go as
oh,
much
okay.
as we want. I don't
I
know
think
how,
sometimes I ramble like when I'm like writing, so I'm just like, wait, I can't type anymore for some reason. But I was just curious.
oh, you know what, there may have been on some, I think it was a 600 limit. So we can change that up now that you are saying that. Yeah, that might have been something that we can do. So you're saying a longer limit?
Yeah, yes, please.
Okay, perfect.
I also had that issue as well.
Okay, nope, great to know. So longer than 600 characters. And I'll have to see on this, on our Survey Monkey, we can do that. On Zoom, it's a little bit different, so I'll check in to see if we can do that. All right, so then we're gonna go on to number 2. I love how this kind of, we can look at the data in different ways, but a clean and sober environment and terminology. In talking to many youth and young adults with lived experience, they stress the importance of having a clean and sober environment to live in for a few months while transitioning back into their lives after inpatient care. We want to understand your views on this and the terminology used. So this is the first part of the question. A, do you agree that maintaining a clean and sober environment for 3 months post-inpatient treatment is important for a successful recovery? So as you can tell, it looks like the majority, 44%, actually said, oh, that's an interesting color. Let's go down here and look. I'm pretty sure they're agreeing, but I want to make sure that before we say that. Yeah, so 44% agreed that that is an important factor. And then we have different levels. So pretty split. Does anybody want to talk about, because it kind of looks like a couple, one of you said 9, 1, 8, 7, 2 of you voted 6. And it doesn't look like anybody disagreed with that. So any thoughts or comments on this one?
I am definitely willing to share my answer on that one as well, but I also want to make sure that other people have a chance too, because I know I just shared a lot for the other one, so I'll give it a minute. But I feel comfortable sharing mine.
Great. Anybody else have comments on this one? All right, please share.
Okay, cool. So mine was kind of based on like I think I put 7 for that. So mine is like I definitely agree, but it was also mentioned in another question after that, that like do you think that, you know, they should be I don't remember the wording of
Early.
it, but basically yeah, should they be like released if they relapse? And I don't agree with that. Like I don't think that that should be a uh I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I don't think that they should be released if they have a relapse. So that's kind of why I put mine in the middle, because I wasn't like really sure with those two questions, like where to put that, because they're very intertwined, I feel like. But yeah, I guess I put 7 because it's like I think it's an important, like, even thinking about like I don't have lived experience with like substance use and having like been in a facility like that or treatment for like that. But like even just thinking about like behavioral health, like I know like even just behavioral health, and I know it's totally different for substance use, but like there's like this like I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like I feel like there's a lot of pressure to like, especially if you've been in like intensive like inpatient care, to like magically be 100% better when you get out. um so I think that there's like, if you like have a mental health episode, or like if you're still struggling in any way or like whatever like that, like after you're discharged, that there's just there can be a lot of like condemnation and shame around that, and like from yourself and also like other people or like your like quote unquote support team. You can just feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm like I was doing so good and now I'm terrible, like why am I still struggling with this? But it's like in reality it takes a long time, like especially if that's, like a lot of people turn to things or have mental health issues because of like complex trauma and stuff like that. And so like it takes a long time to like reroute that and like find other ways and like find that balance in life again and stuff. So like I I strongly don't believe that, like I do think it's important to have that like clean and like I guess like sober environment and like environment where you feel safe. But at the same time I don't think that it should be like, oh, you make one mistake and you're out, sort of thing, Like if you're like genuinely like showing an effort and you're trying and then you relapse, like that's like I don't think that you should be like just out, Like I don't think you should just be kicked to the curb. Like that's messed up in my opinion. So yeah, that's kind of why I put the answer I did.
No, thank you. Arthur, I'm gonna come back since we're talking here.
Thanks. That resonates with me. What struck me is the question was, is that the right terminology, clean and sober? And what struck me about that was just fumbling around for what the right terminology would be. Is really what's more important is a clear delineation of what is meant. So there's a mutual, all-inclusive understanding of what that means, because that's part of the agreement to come in. That's part of the agreement we want the young people to live up to, right? To have a shared mutual understanding what that means. I think with that, if there's a violation of what that understanding is, I think what's being spoken to here regard to trauma-informed is a non-carceral response. So maybe a deep reflection and thinking about how to respond to a violation, because our state systems have just a clear way of dealing with a violation of what we're calling clean and sober, right? In the environment that's really harmful, especially to young people that have experienced trauma, and drags them further into carceral settings. So if there's like a non-carceral, maybe a healthcare basis response, it just merits deep reflection on how to respond in a trauma-informed way that doesn't drag young people back into harmful state systems, and a clear delineation of what clean and sober, or whatever the term is. I think a clear delineation of what the parameters and the agreement is more important than the terminology. Thanks.
No, thank you for that. I'm writing notes. And again, this is why I'm so glad we're getting everybody's input and having these discussions now prior to the RFP and providers actually running these programs, so that it's clear on what the community is saying. So do we have other name suggestions? Number 4, I don't want to share the answers of people who don't. So does anybody want to say what other terminology they use? Jim, do you want to talk about why we had this one on here?
Yeah. Well, being a certified chemical dependency counselor for many years, That term, over the years, people have said, just because I use, what does that mean then? I'm dirty? So I think some people experiencing it as pejorative and judgmental. Um, and on the other hand, we've heard from people who have X number of days, months, or years sobriety. They're proud and they want to say I'm clean. So I think we're trying to figure out, is there a way? Because I agree with you, Arthur, 100%. Let's be clear on the expectations, make sure young people understand. And at the same time, language does matter. So we've just got some feedback about let's not call it clean and sober. And then in the same meeting, someone said what I just said. Well, I like saying I'm clean. So I think there's no right answer here. We just wanted to have the courage to ask the question, so that when we do use whatever language we use, we're walking into it with eyes wide open. But young people have been clear they want an environment where that supports them trying to heal and work on whether it's mental health and or substance use disorder. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, thank you. So anybody have other word suggestions? Or thoughts?
I'm
on
happy to share the ones I put in there. And then Jim, I would say the same thing. That's the feedback I've heard is, yeah, if clean is one end of a spectrum, then dirty is the other end. And also I've heard the terminology also comes from when people would pass UAs, whether it was clean or dirty. I have no idea if that's true. But I just said the other ones I've seen that I think works is either just call it a sober living space or living in sobriety, drug and alcohol. Mine are right there, so you can read them as I say it, drug and alcohol free or recovery focused. I just think, yeah, the term clean comes with some judgment to some people, and some people do like it. But I think if some people don't like it, then
Great.
alternatives are better.
Anybody else? And thank you, Scott.
I have one.
Yeah.
Being in recovery.
Got it.
Yeah.
And again, for that, maybe, well, that's a whole different conversation because then it comes back into the mental health and then the substance use disorder. But it's a great suggestion too. All right, we're going to move on and we are going to go to number 5. Make our pie chart. So reasons for early exits. And we started to kind of talk about this in the question above. So I'm really glad because I think this is one of the most important questions of all of them. Again, knowing before we enter into the contract, the RFP, and the actual implementation of the program. So understanding perspectives for early exit policies. I'm saying we're also using that because we're trying to steer away from the term discharge just in general, right? Really reflecting on what we've talked about, where youth or young adults in that punitive action are just discharged and left without support. So we're calling this early exit policies. Understanding perspectives for early exit policies helps us balance accountability with compassion and support in the development of the Bridge Return to Community Housing programs. So A, do you think an individual should be exited from the program if they relapse while in the Bridge housing program? Let's look at this. So let's actually kind of split. So 33%. No, I'm actually going to go this way because it's easier for me, but I like that we can see. Well, did everybody answer this one? Yeah, 9. Let's go back into the pie chart because that's not actually showing us. Okay, so here we go. So 3 people, 5 people agreed or were neutral. And then there were a couple who disagreed. So do we want to have a conversation on this one? Because it looks like there's some strong opinions here as well. And then we can go into I'm actually very interested to see what the reasons are in the question below. So do you want me to run through this and we can look at what some of the reasons are so we can have a broader conversation? Because that's the next one under. So I'm going to go ahead and just read that. It says reasons for early exits. And again, this is for the providers who are going to be running these programs so we can help them understand before they're even starting it. So what are the top 3 reasons and or behaviors you believe an individual should exit the program early? This one we're definitely going to need to have some dialogue on. So Scott, you want me to call on you?
Sure. I think for my thought process was, I think, and maybe this was earlier discussions, and I'm not sure if it's solidified a little differently since I missed a few meetings, but my understanding was like, if somebody does relapse maybe once, you know, it is part of recovery, then that would be acceptable. But if it was more of like this egregious, or they're not making like steps towards recovery, or it's like, oh, they're relapsing repetitively and it doesn't seem very recovery focused, then it would be like terms for exit. But I think a typical recovery does include relapse, at least in my own professional opinion. So I think it's hard to know where that line is, though, as I'm like saying this out loud. It's like I'm even thinking myself, well, then where would the line be? But I'm not sure if relapse would be, it's not like one of the top 3 I put on there. Mine was more of like either inappropriate behavior physically, sexually, or if it was like blatant disregard for having a recovery oriented environment, whether it's their own use or maybe even distributing. I can't remember the third thing I put. It's down there if you don't mind scrolling down a little bit.
You're okay with me. Yeah.
And then I also said, yeah, like not using appropriate language, maybe not respecting others or pronouns and names, or using slurs, disrespectful language repetitively. And if there's like appropriate redirection and the person still isn't able to kind of comply, then possibly, you know, since it's a recovery oriented environment.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else have thoughts in here on this topic?
I would love to kind of go off of what Scott was saying on something. I started to put it in the chat, but I totally get what Scott's saying, and I do agree with it. I would just personally feel like a lot more comfortable, like, again, clearly identifying and defining what Scott was kind of talking about, like with the repetitive relapse that doesn't look or seem like recovery focused. Because like I agree with that, but at the same time, I would want to make sure that was clearly defined, because I feel like that could be like misused potentially, unfortunately. And I'm not saying that it would always be misused, or that all, you know, staff would be like be like that, but I'm just saying, like, I can definitely see the potential for even just unintentionally, if a staff member didn't have the right education or training on it, like, or something like that, or like a preconceived like notion about, you know, how addiction works or something. And even just like I'm thinking about like mental health things too, like for example, like someone with ADHD who has an addiction, it might be completely different from someone, you know, without ADHD who has an addiction, because ADHD tends to like kind of amplify that addictive personality trait, which I don't know if that's the right phrasing, but just literally like scientifically, like the wiring in the brain, like it doesn't get the right amount of chemicals from daily normal like healthy tasks and coping skills that it would from like unhealthier ones. And so just like literally just like things like that really make a huge difference. And it's like, well, you know, maybe that person with ADHD or whatever else is really genuinely trying, but they are having more relapses because of that than say someone without that. And so I would just want to really define what that effort would look like. Because even just with my lived experience of like mental health things, I've definitely had a lot of like misunderstanding from people with like my own mental health journey and what that's looked like for me. Because like while I've literally been doing 110%, sometimes people have been like, oh, you're not trying at all. So I would just want to make sure that that was clearly defined. But I do definitely agree personally with what Scott was saying. Like, you know, there needs to be like, it needs to be recovery focused, because that's the whole point of it. And like obviously, especially if that person's going to be around other people who are also trying to recover, like, and putting in that effort, like it does need to be a healthy environment. And so like as long as that effort is defined and is being like put in, you know, and like I also think like check-ins with each youth, whether or not there are relapses, like honestly, because recovery is hard. Like, and so yeah, I think like check-ins and having like consistent like that support and everything, which is mentioned that there would be like that optional like behavioral health peer support and everything like that, which I love, by the way. But yeah, I agree.
Great. Are there any other comments on this one?
I would just second what they were saying is, yeah, but I also think it would be tough to know where that line is or what the like policy or procedure would look like. It's like, yeah, how do you? So just wanted to say that before I have to run to at 2 o'clock. So sorry, I have to run early.
No, thank you so much, Scott, and you've been great. All right, we're gonna keep going on. We're gonna skip through this, and I'm very excited to read everybody. So let's go ahead and let's just see. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of zoom in so we don't see and move this. So this is one of the written ones too. So this was beneficial services in the housing program. What was just talked about, how you said you really like that. So to ensure the Bridge housing program effectively meets the diverse needs of young adults and promotes their overall well-being and successful reintegration, we've identified several key voluntary services that will be available. I want to stress the word voluntary because that's a really important part, which I'm sure many people know here. These are voluntary. This is a voluntary program. So the available services will be peer support, behavioral health support, medication assisted treatment, housing support, and then flexible funding opportunities. Is there anything you believe that we are missing? And I can see part of Scott's answer, and I know he was okay with us sharing that, but for the rest of the group, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on other possible voluntary services. James.
So I'm the second guest there. And
Okay,
I would definitely say that the job placement and job coach or employment opportunities is a big one, and assisting with those social determinants of health that aren't necessarily directly tied to a medical intervention. So making sure that when someone's leaving, they're not just leaving into homelessness, or they don't have the ability to afford rent where they're living because they don't have a job. So I think that would be a pretty crucial component to getting people into employment so that they feel empowered to continue on with the trajectory that they're going.
totally agree. I see we have a couple hands up. All right, V, you want to go first because I think you were up.
Yeah, I was gonna say like tailored therapy or medication if people want. Like I'm like trying to think how to word this. Like specific for the individual and their diagnosis. Because I never realized how like my diagnosis dictate my actions, like whether I'm in like an episode or like I just can't focus, or like there's times when I'm fixated and there's times when I'm not. So how do I word this? Sorry, just bear with me real quick. It's like Mayana said, like where, oh my gosh, I like don't know how to word this. Hold on, give me a second. Mayana, do you want to go since your hand's raised?
Sure, you're all good. Yeah, I don't know if this would like be realistic or an option at all. But I just know I'm neurodivergent, and that completely like changes a lot of things because my brain's literally wired differently than a neurotypicals. And so in my own journeys and my own like treatment plans and treatment and all of that, it's completely different, and obviously it's going to be completely different for each individual regardless of whether they're neurodiverse or not. But I just think there's a lot of misunderstanding and just lack of education around neurodivergence when it comes to treatment. Going kind of back to my example with the ADHD thing. And so I don't know, again, I don't know if this is realistic or not, but maybe like if a youth or a young adult would like if they like wanted like support with that, like um I don't really know how to word what I mean, but I guess like if there was like other specifically neurodivergent like staff, or at least those who like have specific training in that, that they could have conversations with or get that like support from. I think that could be really helpful. And then also like, this is also like maybe not realistic, because I know a lot goes into it and it's expensive and everything, but if like they wanted like potential like evaluation or like things for that, because like it can make a really big difference when like, even if you know that you're neurodivergent but you don't have that like quote unquote official diagnosis, it like makes things a lot harder sometimes if you're like looking for like tailored treatment or like support. So I think that could be really relevant as well.
Thank you. I'm gonna go to Arthur and then V will come back for your thought.
Hey, thanks. I just, I didn't feel it was sufficient. I was racing because of time, so I put resource navigator down there. I just like to clarify what I meant. Like, there's a tremendous amount of resources available, and one of the lacks of accessing them is young people don't even know they're available. So if there's somebody really versed in all the state resources and other organizational resources, that could be tailored to specific cases and unique needs, that would be a real valuable person. And that includes, like I think it was Scott was saying, maybe connections with jobs. So one function of that resource navigator could be connections and partnerships with businesses and other organizations that want to hire these specific young people to give them a foot up. Yeah, but a resource navigator in that sense, I think would be very valuable.
Yeah, I agree. And I just want to say part of what I'm excited about that we're doing on our website, we're actually building out a resource directory with jobs, with all of these to support the youth, but also just like the state as a whole. And so V and MJ have been great. And we're really starting to kind of hone in on a whole wide array of resources so it can live on the site as well as then people in the houses and the providers can have access. So I love hearing you say that. Okay, and then V, and then we're gonna move on and we're gonna wrap up because I think we have one more question and then we don't need to go over everyone's demographic data for this group. So V, go ahead.
Yeah, being mindful of time, I'll just make this real quick. I finally figure out what I'm trying to say. Like if people consent in there, when you're in the bridge housing, really sitting down and helping like individuals understand like how their trauma affects them, if that makes sense, like why it is that like they're reacting this way, like kind of like validate that and be like here's some tips on how to ground yourself specific to that diagnosis or specific to your medication or specific to like these episodes. And then like tips after you leave on how like to stay grounded, and even if you did have an episode, how to get through it, if that makes sense. Because like for so long I've been trying to figure out like how to stay consistent, but it's like accepting that if my mental health isn't doing well and I fall into like different states, like it's gonna pass, you know, like that's just identifying the patterns of how like I behave, like or how my mental health goes. Like I think you all catch my flow. So yeah, like really helping people understand what's going on in their body, you know, and how to handle all of that if you're not with like your support system immediately, you know, like how do you help yourself? And then also how do you reach out for help after?
I think that actually tees us up really well for the next kind of the last real question, which is the return to community. And part of that, so the plan is gathering input on critical elements of a return to community plan helps us design comprehensive support strategies for individuals transitioning from behavioral health inpatient care into stable housing. So the first part of that question is, what do you believe are the most important areas to include in a successful return to community plan, and what specific services, resources, or support systems do you think are crucial for a transition back to community? And I want to just say, V, it's like what you said, either directly coming out into the houses, but also I think we want to make sure that the houses as well have a good return to community plan for that next step afterwards, to make sure that's continuing on. So I'm just interested if anybody has any thoughts or comments on this one.
Also to add to Arthur's point about like spreading awareness of resources, having them like tailored to specific needs. It's more how do we access it? You know, you can give anybody a list of resources and numbers, addresses and stuff, but it's just like, what do I do with it once I have the sheet? Like if I don't have my case manager with me, what if I had like anxiety, like in calling these places? What do I even say after I call? You know, like how do I identify when a case manager isn't a right fit for me and I want to seek different types of help? So like stuff like that, building like self-confidence and independent skills, like in navigating resources.
That's a great point. Any other questions or comments on this one? All right, and then the rest is just demographic information, and if anybody's curious, majority of the individuals on this meeting are aged 26 to 35, and then we have a pretty equal 18 to 26 and 35 to 50. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'm going to first come up here and make sure we can, let's see. So there we go. Thank you so much for taking that survey, for participating in the survey. I just really appreciate everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and actually, we're skipping over the wellness break. That way we can kind of keep going. So, MJ, I'm going to pass this to you to go ahead and introduce our next segment. And then if we end early, great. But I just want to say thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording our meeting now as well. MJ, are you?
Yeah, I was gonna go after you stopped the recording.
Oh, okay, I'm actually looking for some reason the recording. Here we go. Here we go.